Let's get started. So you can hear about 6 wonderful women in the 6 different counties surrounding us. Welcome to Women's Equality Day. The League of Women Voters loves to celebrate this August 26th every year because it's in commemoration of the passage, well, it's in commemoration of the certification of the passage of the 19th Amendment. And I think it's just important that we recognize women's accomplishments everywhere. My aunt, before she died a few years ago, said, I really wish something had been written about my great-grandmother. My great-great-grandfather was a very important man, but I don't know anything about my great-grandmother. So I think this is one way to do that, and we know that women have been doing so many things, and hopefully you will leave here today with a lot of hope and inspiration and the willingness to keep persevering for all of the different things that we need to accomplish and keep working on. I found this quote from Maya Angelou when I was looking for quotes for today, how important it is for us to recognize and celebrate our heroes and our sheroes. We don't hear about sheroes often enough. And just to remind you, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We encourage informed and active participation in government, and we work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and we work to influence public policy through education and advocacy. I think most of you should all be familiar with voter guides where we present nonpartisan, both sides of the organization. So, or candidates get to provide us with information, and all of that is not edited. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. And our vision is a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Our value is that we believe in the power of women to create a more perfect democracy. So just some things to keep in mind after you leave here today, and keep encouraging everyone you know to vote. But before they go to the polls, to educate themselves on who's running or what the issues are. But it's really important. We've seen recently that it's not what public opinion is that accomplishes what passes or who's elected. It's who turns out. When only 9% or 6% of the electorate turns out to vote, that's not a democracy. So it's so important to keep encouraging people to vote. So today we're going to enjoy some time hearing about women in surrounding counties and the different things they've accomplished in their community. And we're going to start with Llano. We're going to have Pat Longweaver, who is going to tell us about her mother, Martha Gilliland. Unfortunately, Pat is not feeling well, might have COVID, and she certainly didn't want to spread it among us. So we're so fortunate that Diane Moster decided to kind of pinch hit last minute for her.
Yes.
So Diane's going to begin today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Pat, Martha's daughter, is an attorney in Midland, and she was happy to come today. And then last night we got word from her that she's ill. So I'm sorry she can do this for you. So Martha Royce Gilliland Long was a woman of strong faith and driven by a sense of purpose. She was born in Baird, Texas on September 11th, 1934. After growing up in Baird, Martha spent her freshman year of college at Howard Payne University and transferred and obtained a degree in chemistry from North Texas University in Denton, graduating summa cum laude. Martha's parents were Stella Carter Gilliland, a registered nurse, and Pastor Royce Frazier Gilliland. Her father, however, died when she was 9, and as a young teenager, she started working as an assistant bookkeeper, which she continued doing until she completed her education. Later, Martha worked as a summer missionary. After college graduation, she moved to Llano to become a home demonstration agent. Soon after, Martha became a full-time rancher when she united in marriage to Hudson Long. She loved her family and was thrilled to share with them the joys of ranching, but she did not share her John Deere tractor. And I understand that she refurbished an antique tractor, and she was the one that really ran the ranch. She's survived by 3 children, Pat, who is her daughter, David, and Paul. No, wait a minute. Pat, Pamela, and Paul. There we go. And grandchildren. So she was the kind of mom who did her best to support her children and grandchildren, from 4-H to band to football practice to college theater trips. She was always ready to go. Her servant's heart led her to participate in the Bill Glass Women's Prison Ministry, where for years she worked with prisoners in units from the Dallas County Jail to the Women's Death Row Unit in Huntsville. As part of her passion for helping women, she worked for years with her church's Mother's Day Out program. As part of one fundraiser, she participated in a fun run, and that started a passion she had for running and walking. She accumulated too many medals and trophies to count. The family supported and enjoyed watching her run at the National Senior Games at Stanford University in California. The Capital 10K in Austin became an annual event. Gold medals for her age bracket became the norm. Martha's engagement in her community ranged from the Women's Culture Club of Llano, which is how I got to know her, Junior Women's Culture Club. Some of her favorite projects were the Llano County Library and raising funds for scholarships, to the board of the Llano County Historical Museum, not hysterical, Historical Museum, where she was very interested in historical preservation, curating projects and special exhibits, as well as being a major contributor to historical publications, and was a driving force behind Llano's New Horizons, a relief organization that administers relief funds for families in Llano County. From Willie and Waylon to Bob Marley, she loved her music and theater. In Valley Springs, Texas, the eye of a casting agent was caught by her $1 million smile and her cute character of a husband, Hudson. This led them to begin as featured extras in a number of movies and commercials and music videos and speaking roles. Her favorite roles were in Hope Floats and Bernie. Millions have now seen her great smile. One of her very good friends, who is here today, told me last night that she had a joy for life and learning and serving others. Her sense of humor and her love of adventure made her a fun companion. So, Martha Long, we miss you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So would we recognize any films or commercials, do you
Well,
think?
Bernie and Hope Floats, are y'all familiar
She
with
was
that?
in many commercials.
Okay,
And she had a speaking line. She was a waitress in Hope Floats.
okay.
She was a church lady, one of the basement church ladies in Bernie.
Okay.
The basement church lady, okay.
She was also in a film about pioneer women, that an author from Seguin wrote that, and then they turned it into a movie. And Martha drove a mule team in the movie. One of the few people I could find that could handle a mule team.
Which was kind of amazing because she was pretty young. I mean, she was not part of that generation, having been born in the 30s.
No,
Right.
but
Interesting.
Martha could do anything.
Sounds like she definitely did, and encouraged a lot of people. Interesting that in both physical activity and supporting women in the prison system too. So next from Gillespie County, Cristol Nixon Schoessow is going to tell us about her mother, Louise Enderle Nixon. Come on up, Cristol.
And for you that don't know, Janice and I were roommates in college. Many years ago, right? Well, I'm here to tell you about my mother. Her name was Emily, or Amelia Louise, and we have it very different ways in some of the records, but she generally went by Louise Enderle Nixon. In 1919, the Texas League of Women's Voters was organized. That same year, my mother was born in a house on College Street in Fredericksburg, just 2 blocks from where we are today, across from the public school. Louise, as she was commonly known, but once wrote, "I was born a feminist with all the independence of my ancestors. I inherited that trait from my mother." She also credited a man, Thomas Taylor, with spurring her interest in women's rights and capabilities. Thomas Taylor was the Dean of Engineering, the engineering department at the University of Texas, and was the landlord to my mother and father when they attended the University of Texas. From early on, Louise's family, and particularly the women in the family, had atypical roles. Her great-grandmother was the assistant postmistress in Kerrville, taking on the responsibilities of all the transactions of the postmaster, as well as being a helpmate for her husband, who was a miller and had mills in Comfort, Burney, Kerrville, and Fredericksburg. Her mother, Louise Forrest, was born in Fayetteville, Texas, and lost her mother when she was only 13. And she and her 4 siblings were raised by her father, Henry Forrest, who was an educator and who was the president of the Fredericksburg College, again, right down the street, sometimes called the Methodist College, where he was a teacher from 1879 to 1883. And then her father was born in Kerrville, and he was salutatorian in his class in 1906, and he had met my grandmother in Kerrville when she and her father were guests at a hotel. And a year later, after he graduated, they married, and they took jobs as teachers in various different towns for a number of years. And then in 1912 moved to Fredericksburg, where my grandfather had the position of land surveyor, which he was county surveyor for 62 years here. And he was a science and math teacher and coach. And then her mother was instrumental in organizing a reading club, charter member of the public schools ladies auxiliary. And why am I telling you this? It's because she believes a lot of her energies were a result of her family. They were extremely musical. And my grandmother was a composer and piano teacher, and at 16 her father even had published in Colorado some of her music, and one of her songs that she wrote was the runner-up to Texas Our Texas when the selection was made by the state. So early on, my mom was very musical, and whether it was tap dancing in Fredericksburg or Kerrville, or acting in plays, or singing, or participating in operettas, or writing poetry, that was her thing. She married my father, who was also a graduate of Fredericksburg High School, and they enrolled in the University of Texas. Louise wrote that, and I think she also, when she was interviewed by the Institute of Texas Culture, she said that most women worked to put their husbands through college at that time, but she chose to work and attend college alongside Victor, and they graduated at the same time. The women's culture clubs had brought pressure upon the state legislature to create the College of Fine Arts at that time, which had been removed from the state's budget in 1925. The year that she enrolled at UT, they restored the Fine Arts department, and she majored in drama. The drama department had many talented students at that time, some of which that went on to be prominent Hollywood actors and actresses, and one such standout was a politician and former governor of Texas, John Conley, who was in her class. And during her last year at UT, she was awarded by the Curtain Club the Key, which is bestowed upon individuals for best acting and best cooperation on and off stage. Upon graduation in '42, she and my father moved to Baytown, where he was an engineer with Humble, and she went to work as a teacher in drama and speech. But within 4 years, they were back in Fredericksburg. Louise hit the ground running upon her return to Fredericksburg. She was extremely passionate in the arts. She became employed by the school district as a reading and drama teacher, but she believed it was important to promote and cultivate community interest in dramatic, musical, and theater presentations. Outside of the classroom, with the goal of establishing a community theater group and with the support of the drama department at UT, as well as the junior JCs and the Chamber of Commerce, they put on productions for and by the community. The cast of characters and production staff usually consisted of people from all walks of life within Gillespie County, whether they were doctors, ranchers, attorneys, funeral directors, store owners, women, children, homemakers, just to name a few. And one was Hondo Crouch, which some of you may have known or remember. Anyway, the community at large assisted in gathering the costumes and the props. In one article I read in the Fredericksburg Standard at that time, Kathy, was that she was looking for a Surrey with or without fringe on the top needed for a production. Some of the play titles were Father's Knows Best, Mañana is Another Day, Howdy Stranger, and You Can't Take It With You. The last one, You Can't Take It With You, that I mentioned, was presented in the round at the Old Nimitz Hotel. It was quite an accomplishment because just a few months earlier, the San Antonio Theater, which had been in existence for 25 years, had just presented their first theater in the round. Louise also participated as an actress and dancer in many of the first Fredericksburg community theaters and in school and church productions. She would always have time to assist students in their UIL events, and she would also judge them. But most of the people would credit her greatest contribution to the arts in Fredericksburg, and her biggest undertaking, which was the service as the director of both the 125th and the 150th anniversary of the founding of Fredericksburg pageants. I'm gonna go back a little bit. Her mother and father, early in the 20s, had planted a peach orchard. And although the first years were difficult, they didn't give up, and they began propagating their own stock. And by the mid-20s, they had several hundred trees that were producing. And it was my grandfather's boyhood friendship with the Butt family in Kerrville that provided the first outlet of their peaches in a grocery store. Louise performed physical work and worked in sales, and by the time she returned in Fredericksburg after college, she and my dad joined the parents in their fruit orchard business as well as their other pursuits, and Louise became a spokesperson for the Texas Hill Country peach industry. She would travel to Austin and San Antonio promoting the commercial peach industry, and reporters from many magazines and newspapers and television stations from around the state would interview her. The original sales outlets and packing shed were just at the Enderle homestead, and the old barn there is still, it's right behind Whataburger if you're familiar with Fredericksburg. But eventually they expanded to roadside stands and outlets on Main Street. Victor and my grandpa would handle the production end of it, while Louise and her mother would handle the sales. People from all over the state would contact her to see when the best time was to purchase peaches and to order peaches, which she would package and send by bus and mail all over the United States. One of her cherished framed photos in her home was a picture of a young Congressman, George Herbert Walker Bush, biting into a peach sitting alongside a box of Enderle Nixon peaches on the steps of the United States Capitol. I have a copy of a survey she filled out in 1976 for the Chamber of Commerce. She listed tourism as the #1 priority and wrote, "Our regional agricultural productiveness and our traditional and historical attractions should entice more visitors to spend more time and money here. Let's advertise more." She was truly a visionary, and I can't even imagine what she would think of Fredericksburg these days. Her mother and father had instilled in her an undying pride in our country and a philosophy that democracy works best when people research, study, and discuss issues to arrive at the best possible solutions. Her father claimed he never missed voting in a presidential election in his life. He was quite a humble man, and when he spoke, people listened. I ran across a 1962 letter he had written to the voters of the Fredericksburg Independent School District concerning the bond election to build the high school, which is where it is now on 16 South. He wrote, "The most valuable asset of our community that it has is its youth. Their most valuable gift is a good education. It is our responsibility to see to it that our children receive the benefits of a fully adequate school plan. About 1,400 of your children crowd that school ground each day." He went on to say that if the community did not solve its own education problems, overcrowding, poor teaching facilities, etc., Washington would, and the community would be sending its money to Washington and lose control. Like her father, Louise did not hesitate to speak out on local and national political issues and took action when she felt it was appropriate. One that I recall was when I was in elementary school. Louise thought it was wrong that the school bus service, was not extended to a certain group of what we would now call socially and economically disadvantaged children who would walk quite a distance and they were barefooted. I suspect maybe at that time that the school had a policy like they do now that you have to live with it beyond a certain distance from school to have bus service. But whatever the case, I can remember she addressed that issue with the school officials and bus service was extended to those children. She was active in politics and organized the Gillespie County Republican Women's Group during the Lyndon Johnson years. And I might add that the Johnsons and the Nixons were friends, agreed to disagree, and one of my dad's pride and joys is the book Vantage Point, and LBJ had written a little note to them in it and had personally brought it to the house. Louise would greet candidates and accompany them down Main Street to meet prospective voters and to share their political views. Louise attended regional, state, and national functions and 2 presidential inaugurations in Washington. Oftentimes when you think of inaugurations, you think of all the socializing and the parties that go with it. Well, my sister and I got to attend the second one with her. And I will tell you that I don't know how she crammed in 1 week's time, as many historical sites and museums as she could. It was truly an experience, although we did get to go to a ball and we saw the parade and the swearing in. But she wanted us to just have the most wonderful experience of learning about our country. In later years, she spent countless hours researching and pouring her energy into the Gillespie County Historical Society and the Gillespie County Historical Commission. She was instrumental in establishing the archives that were located in the Brian's Kirche and keeping it open to the public several days a week. She and a small group of women would seek out collections for the archives and assist many people researching local history in general and their families. Louise and Victor spent the last years of their lives in a nursing home and celebrated 72 years of marriage. Although she had dementia, she was a cheerful resident that would often play the baby grand piano at the nursing home or hum songs in the hallways.
Wow.
She'd look at newspapers, magazines, and books. We had no idea what she could comprehend, but my dad was always at his side, and looking back, he always supported all of her endeavors as she supported his, and truly was the man behind her successes. I'd like to close with this. I read a news clipping about a presentation given by my mother to the Beta Sigma, or the Beta Zeta chapter of Delta Kappa Gamma here, which was a professional teachers organization. She said, "You are the cornerstone. All of us can become pathfinders who are willing to take risk and who do not fear change." She challenged the women present and asked what they had done and were doing to improve the status of women and to help mold the future positively. The article said that every member present responded and shared a variety of leadership activities: summer recreational programs, summer school sports for girls, historical society, study travel, Meals on Wheels, church youth, sponsorship and governance, writing, homemaking, and encouraging women to study for advanced degrees. I believe if Louise were here today, that she might address you as follows. You, the members of the Hill Country chapter of League of Women Voters, are the cornerstone. The work you do today can and will have generational impacts. What are you doing to improve the status of women, and how are you positively molding the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. It's always fun to learn more. Bunny is kind of our history person in the league, I think, most actively involved in history, but it's fun to just learn all of these things and see how the legacies have continued. So now we're going to hear from Lois Shaw, who is going to tell us about Anna Doyle. And she brought a picture, which is down here, which we'll make sure to get on the video. I didn't say, Kathy Leroy is doing a video of this, and we're gonna post it on our website. So we'll get to review things we forget, or encourage other people to listen to. Come on, Lois, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I am to talk about Annie Walker Doyle, and I apologize for my voice. I have spasmodic dysphonia. Anna Walker Doyle came to Kerrville because her husband was very sick with tuberculosis. He died in 1913, and she stayed on. In her obituary in the Kerrville Mountain Sun, it noted, Mrs. Doyle was always among her people. She has been an inspiration and a leader. Her people, not the whole community, because she was different from the majority. When she arrived in Kerrville, she saw that it was a great need for education of the Black children of the community. Soon after her arrival, she found that education among her race was sadly neglected. She went around the community and collected money and purchased 3 lots. And she persuaded the members of the Kerrville school board to donate an old school building for the purpose of establishing a school in the Black community. She was the only teacher there for many years and had served as principal for more than 25 years.
Wow.
She was educated at Tuskegee University. Well, it wasn't a university then, it was called Tuskegee Institute. And her husband, Henry, had a doctorate. And they both were very involved in education until Henry became ill with tuberculosis. So as an early graduate of Tuskegee Institute, it was founded by Booker T. Washington. She was described in the Kerrville community as the best educated African American to have ever lived there. Though her pastor husband, who was Henry, had more education. When she assumed her duties as teacher, and it was called the Colored School, she was paid $85 per month to be the sole teacher at the school. And that was considerably noted as less than other teachers in the district at that time. When she died in 1937, 24 years after her husband, there was a small push to name the school after her. And so that's how the colored school became Doyle School. And her legacy still lives on because after the school, after integration, the school was dormant for a while, and then Kerr County Daycare was there for a while. And then the school kindergarten, Kerrville Community's kindergarten was there. Then the building was dormant for approximately 7 years, I think. And then there was a community effort to seek out a grant and to purchase the building from the school board. And the grant was granted, and it became Doyle Community Center. So Anna is really her name. Annie, pardon me, is the real name. We were fortunate enough in 2019 to meet her great-granddaughter. And she came back and spoke for one of our Black History programs. And so her brother, Bert Doyle, heard about his sister being there, and so then we got to meet him because he came to Kerrville and visited, and we learned some of the family history as far as that's what they knew. So Annie, her legacy lives on because of her great love of education, or for education. And we feel fortunate, and we still feel the spirit at the community center of having met some of her family. And in 2021, we moved back. We had moved out of the building for renovations. And the granddaughter, 2 of the great-granddaughters came back with their sons. And so we felt a kindred spirit with the Doyles, and Anna's spirit lives on.
One of the things that's occurring at the Doyle Center right now is citizenship classes, which one of our members, Alicia, teaches. And recently, I'm thinking we have had about a half dozen of those students. How many? 7.
As of Wednesday,
So, great program going on in Kerrville in the Doyle
We
Center.
have full partners with us, we get this space free, which is a loving gesture.
Yes, yes. So many things occur, programs, and I understand there's an event today too.
Mhm.
So, want to know more about that? BK or Lois can tell you, for sure. Next is our, one of our own, Pat Fry is from Blanco County, is going to tell us about her grandmother, Tila Pickle. Thank you, Pat.
Good morning. I am very honored to be here to tell my grandmother's story because it's the first time that I've had an opportunity like this in a public setting, and it is very special. I'm new to the Hill Country League, quite new, somewhat new, and so I'm just happy to be here. I wanted to thank those that invited me to do this. My name, as she said, is Pat Fry. I'm a fourth generation resident on our family land in the north end of Blanco County. I wanted to speak about my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and I am a little nervous about public speaking, so I am probably going to read most of this. I'm honored to have been asked to speak of someone in my life that could fit a model to be recognized for Women's Equality Day. That person happens to be my maternal grandmother, Tila Pickle, whom I will lovingly refer to in this message as Grandma. I came to know my grandma in a way that most kids of my day during the 50s and 60s did not normally have the occasion to do. You see, Grandma took my little sister, who had just turned 8, and myself, 9 at the time, almost 10. She took us into Ray's because our mom had passed away. My grandmother's only daughter, my mom, passed away from cancer. Grandma was 67 years old at the time she took in my little sister and I. I'm 70, so 3 years ago, my grandmother was the age of I was the age that my grandmother was when she took in these little girls, so it's just always astounded me that she took us in. So, anyway, there's a great deal to be shared of an elderly, single woman raising 2 little girls. One of them high-functioning, mentally handicapped, and the other one who suffered severely with asthma. I was the asthmatic. For now, I shall hold off on some of that and tell you more about her rugged individualism during her almost 7 decades before we came along. Grandma was born in the north end of Blanco County in the community of Cypress Mill, September 11th, 1895. She was the middle child of 5, born to John and Louise Wenmohs, who had been established there with land holdings and a sizable cattle herd. Grandma grew up with a strong work ethic of rural Texas, along with the stern discipline of the old German settlers. Education was high on the list of first achievements in the little country school there in Cypress Mill. There they would ride a mule. She would ride a mule with her siblings. One of the stories I recall her telling was to make the mule go that they would have to poke it with a hat pin. Now, how deep and how hard the poking went was just up to a little girl's imagination to figure out. So in my mind, I thought it was long, deep, and hard. Upon returning home after the end of the school day, she would help her dad with the ranching chores. It was an expectation. This early exposure and influence spurred her love for that lifestyle that carried her over into her adult life. I remember her telling me that her dad had told her that she was the best boy he ever raised. Her early adulthood was precisely during the time of the women's suffrage. However, I do not have any stories to share with you today about her involvement in that. However, I can tell you that from surmising what I did know of her, I can confidently say that she was independent in her spirit about life, and that independence, with that independence came a voice and an action that showed a real get-it-done attitude. Fast forwarding to her ranching life, Grandma was left some land by her dad during the 40s, and it propelled her into a beef, cattle, and Angora goat business. Now, as most of you know, this livelihood was mostly a man's world due to the many expectations of physical labor, strength, and stamina, but she was not deterred. Angora goats required shearing twice a year, dipping, vaccinating, and of course having the baby goats coming in early spring, and along with supplemental feeding. With the exception of the early spring kidding, Grandma would hire one or two of the neighboring menfolk to help with the more physical demands to keep a healthy herd. The shearing was done by the Smith boys of Round Mountain. I remember it being a really busy day to round up the goats, pen them, separate them, shear them, and then bag the mohair. One of my earliest jobs as a little tyke was gathering up the hair after it was sheared, putting it in a tub, and then going and depositing it in the wool sack, which was about 6 foot tall. And so for the first early dumps, it would be, I would supposed to jump down into the sack and stomp it down to make it tight, so that the hair would be packed and that the sack would be nice and tight. So it was a bit of a trick, though, of my size to try to climb out of that 6 or so foot rack. But anyway, I loved it and I was happy to do it. Then there were the cattle. On those work days, they were also very involved and busy, sometimes working just the calves with earmarking, vaccinating, castrating the bull calves. Throwing 100 to 200 pound calf was beyond her capacity, not to mention all the grown cows that needed their routine things done. Were just too big. They were just too big for her 5'4" and 110 pound frame. She was quite petite. These were hard jobs that required the strength of a man, to which Grandma would hire out, as I had again earlier mentioned, would usually be a neighbor. Of course, all of this hard work paid off when the hair and the animals were hauled off to the sale. Coming home with a nice paycheck made it all worthwhile, but the affirming gratification of the lifestyle itself was in no doubt a very notable benefit and blessing. At one moment during her ranching career, she was honored to have been recognized for its champion pen of 10 Hereford heifers sold at the nationally known Union Stockyards in San Antonio, Texas in 1961. And I happen to have her silver platter that she was awarded, and it's inscribed, Champion Hereford, 10 heifers to Tila Pickle, San Antonio Livestock Market Institute, Union Stockyards of San Antonio, Stocker Feeder, Show and Sale, 1961. There is no doubt that Grandma showed herself to be a woman of great strength that mostly came from within. Working and managing a commercial ranching business, producing beef and mohair at the commercial level was definitely a notable contribution. However, in closing, I must admit that it wasn't until I became an adult and had children myself that I realized her selflessness and her strength to take on again the role of becoming a mother at her old age. And it touches me even today as I share about that, because I really didn't realize her sacrifice and what all that involved. Like I said, my sister was mentally handicapped, and I was sickly and asthmatic, and so just everything that went along with that. I could write a book about it, but I don't really care to, but there's enough there. I owe a huge debt of gratitude for her sacrificial love to guide, provide for physically, mentally, and emotionally, along with instilling a can-do ethic that carried over 2 generations and beyond. I think of her often, and I am thankful to her and to God for her being my grandma. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I stomped mohair too when I was a kid. And next, Nancy Dyer is going to tell us about Dot Hatfield from Bandera County. Thank you, Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Dyer, as she said, and I'd like to present Dorothy Ferguson Hatfield of Bandera. She went by Dot. One of the small towns in Bandera County is Medina, and that's where Dot resided, and that's where I live. So a lot of this is about Medina, specific, as opposed to Bandera. Dot wrote 18 books about the history and people of Bandera County. Allison Harbour, the librarian in Medina, at the Medina Community Library, said that Dot told the stories of folks that were not able to tell their stories, and in that way Dot contributed greatly to her community. Another Medina resident described Dot as a ball of fire, donating her time and energy to all the community events in Medina and many in the greater Bandera County. She was born on March 18, 1930, and passed away September 28, 2009, at the age of 79 at her home in Medina. Dot lived in Medina since the age of 12. She married her high school sweetheart, W.O. Hatfield Jr., and the Hatfield family had been in Medina since 1907. They owned and managed the Hatfield store in Medina for many years. In 1978, Dot opened Hatfield Realty. She wrote articles for the True West magazine and for Texas Highways. Dot was elemental in conserving Medina's history, and they had 3 children together. After her death, one of the residents of Bandera County, Martin Cohout, hopefully I said that right, that owns the Medrano Ranch, paid homage to Dot, and I'll paraphrase, it's saying that Hatfield's books, which bear titles such as Medina Memories, Medina, the Mecca of the Hills, Magical Medina, and Medina Glory Land, are compilations of interviews with old-timers, recounting of local legends and full of lively and otherwise unavailable information, such as the tale of Medina's last cattle drive in 1941, or of the impromptu local celebration on November 11, 1918, when the armistice ended World War I, was signed in France, or of Ida Hatfield's account of the 1870 raid in which Indians killed her parents, kidnapped her 2 brothers, and left 8-year-old Ida for dead after piercing her 7 times with lances. As an amateur local historian, she knew her community in a way that no professional academic historian could. Much of what her writing contained was invaluable information that would otherwise have been lost forever. Dot was interviewed by Tasia Bauer and Monica Cochran for their history class in the fall of 2005. They were students at Palo Alto, San Antonio, Texas. And so I gathered some of that interview to get a sense of Dot, because I never did know her. I just, had heard of her. In that interview, Dot stated that her husband is a school teacher here as a coach. He was also county judge for 8 years. I not only got to nose around and find out what happens at school, but I got to find out what happens in politics too. It was fun. We moved here when the war was on. My daddy was a block warden. Do you know what a block warden was? In San Antonio, they had the cities blocked off in sections. He walked along there in the evenings and ensured that there were no lights on. They had blackouts because they thought they might get bombed sometime. I liked to tag along behind him and talk to him a little bit. We would see that all the shades were down and that there were no lights on in the neighborhood. I had to get accustomed to Medina when I moved from San Antonio. It was a lot smaller school and a lot different community. Once I got used to it, I was going to stay no matter what. In the interview, Monica asked, have you ever heard any stories that significantly impacted the town? And I'll paraphrase Dot's response. There's nothing really that comes to mind except to say that oral history was all that we had because no one wrote anything down. They would tell each other about somebody's physical prowess or their ability to shoot straight, one woman's ability to cook better than the others. It was very simple things, not any particular story except to say, well, I remember that time. You remember that time, question mark? They didn't change history. They didn't formulate a local history. I remember how Mr. Secco told me he got tired one day while out hunting. On a beautiful fall day, he lay down in a pile of colorful leaves to take a nap. All of a sudden, he felt as though he was being spied upon. You get out of the woods, sometimes you have that feeling. He opened one eye real slowly and he sees a yellow eye looking down, right down into him. It's a mountain lion. He lays very still and doesn't move. The mountain lion sniffs up and down him and takes off real quick. Mr. Secco decided he better not stay there. So he took a log, covers it with leaves, and got behind a stump to observe. Here comes Mama Lion with two baby lions. They just run and pounce right there on the spot in the leaves. So Monica, the interviewer, asked, she was using him to teach those babies how to hunt? And Dot responded, yeah, how to hunt. He remembered how impressed he was that intelligence, just small stories like that. Monica asked, if there was one thing you'd want future generations of Medina to know about the community, what would it be? Dot responded, regardless of what I might think about it or want them to do, each generation gets their own shot at it. Monica asked, if someone wanted to move to Medina, what reason would you give them to come here? And I'll paraphrase. Dot said, low crime, beautiful, and fairly good year-round weather, no traffic, there's not even a stoplight, no jail, no lawyers, no doctors, no dentists, a place for dreams. I think somebody with a dream. I don't necessarily think that they need to be a young person. A dream is a dream. I never had a big dream growing up. I just felt that I'd been placed here for a reason of some sort. But it didn't gel from in here until I thought, I like the people and I'll just tell their stories. That's when it began to mean something to me as special. Tazia asked, is there anything we haven't asked you that you think we should know about Medina? And Dot's response was, I don't know, we've about exhausted poor Medina. I think to be careful, no matter what part of the country you live in, be careful of the environment and your fellow travelers, which is your animals, your butterflies, your birds, your plants. So we become an entity, not by ourselves as human beings, but so that we become a part of the whole structure of the universe. I don't think you can mistreat one area and not have it affect all the areas. So that's a little glimpse of her through that interview, and I meant to hold that picture up so y'all have a visual of her.
Thank you. That's fun I had read a little bit about her, and she was kind of considered an amateur historian, but it became important later to, I guess, professional historians, because at least she had captured stories and information. And then we have Judy Dewey is going to tell us about Staci Decker. Staci is somebody that is in political office and has worked hard with the league in Kendall County. Thank you, Judy. Sure.
So, one of the most often used words nowadays is also a word that was used frequently back when the suffragettes were hard at work, and when in the 1950s and 60s the African American citizens in our country were all fighting for the right to make their voices heard. And that word is vote. And vote is a noun, and vote is a verb. Vote is part of our organization's name. Voting is an equalizer, voting is power, and because of its importance, our country has established laws and rules and regulations, policies and procedures to be followed in order to vote. And at all levels of our government, from school boards all the way up to through the national elections, we have citizens whose job it is to ensure that those rules and regulations and laws are followed. So today, Kendall County League of Women Voters has chosen to honor our county elections administrator, who is still alive, for her work in ensuring the equal voting status of all qualified voters, both men and women. And her name is Staci Decker. Staci was born and raised in Kendall County. She graduated from Comfort High School in the top 10 of her class. She began working while she was still in high school with the Kendall County Tax Assessor Collector, and she got a little bit of a taste of voter registration. After graduation, she was offered a full-time job with the county as Deputy Tax Assessor Collector, where she handled voter registration, among other things. In 2008, the county created the Office of the Elections Administrator, and she transferred to that department, and after a few years, she was appointed to the position of Elections Administrator by the County Commissioners. She's a member of Texas Association of Election Administrators and the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center. In 2015, she was among the first group of Texas election officials to enroll in the newly created Texas Registered Election Official Program. I'll read that. And by 2013, she'd completed all the courses and obtained her certification. Then she took courses through Auburn University, through the Election Center, and by 2021 had completed all required courses to obtain her national certification as a certified elections registration official. In her time in Kendall County, she has brought many changes to the county voting system. Shortly after taking the position, she began working with both of her local party chairs to conduct a full joint primary election. And in 2012, the local parties conducted the first election in Kendall County with shared locations during the primary. By 2016, the party elections were held jointly. In 2015, she advocated for all electronic voting with the hopes that in the next couple of years, the county would be able to submit their application to participate in county-wide polling place program. She was successful in that attempt. In November of 2019, Kendall County voters were finally able to vote at any polling location on election day. In 2016, she advocated for the digitization of election and voter records in order to bring those records into an easily accessible format. In the summer of 2020, she was successful in bringing a new voting system to the Kendall County voters. While implementing that during a presidential election would have given second thought to many people, she knew this was the most critical time to move to a voter verifiable paper audit trail. Lots of planning, lots of overtime work came in creating the new election materials for the poll workers and the voters, training over 60 new election workers and how to run this massive election during COVID. She and her staff successfully conducted the largest presidential election in the county's history. In September, she will be receiving her 20-year certificate of appreciation from Commissioner's Court for her service to Kendall County. Staci has 2 young children who are growing up in the school she grew up in. She serves proudly on the council of the Boys and Girls Club of Comfort. Staci runs an election office in Kendall County with 3 other young women who she's trained. Those of us who worked with her in the ballot board or at the polling sites are trained by Staci every year or every election. Her attention to detail and the safety of the ballots is amazing. I have been witness to her ability to handle procedural complications, jammed voting machines, and irate voters. I've also seen her request a deputy and drive with him out into the countryside to the home of a disabled elderly citizen. And this woman had failed to sign one thing on her ballot envelope, which would have not been able to count her vote. She drove with the deputy, they went out, they helped this lady sign so that her vote would count. That's Staci, you know. On every election night as the polls close, Staci brings in a contingent of seniors, high school students, mostly girls, who she trains, swears them in, and then oversees all night them unloading all the equipment from the election judges as they bring it in. Nothing goes past her. Staci could not be present today to get this recognition because she's on the job. She left this morning for Florida to attend the Election Center National Conference where they will get yet more training. It's amazing to me how much changes from election to election that this woman has to keep up with. Anybody who has ever worked with her knows that your vote is safe and that she will do everything to make sure that all procedures are followed. And we care very much for her and chose to honor her today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for attending this morning. I hope that you've been inspired in many ways. One of them is maybe you should write your own history so that there's other people that will keep up with what you've accomplished. And also for people to recognize how things have changed in our lifetimes. And I want to recognize some people who came in special outfits for us. So I'm hoping that Kathy and Tammy and Maggie will take time to get a group photo of you in your suffragette outfits. It's a special way to honor them. And I want you to, any of you who are not league members, encourage you to join. We always can use more feet on the ground to try to get people involved in the voting process and educated about how to do it. The other thing is, you might have noticed some little postcards on your table. If there's anybody that you would like to honor or memorialize, we'd be happy for donations, of course. One of the expenses that the league is incurring on a routine basis are the printing of voter guides. We are encouraging people to use Vote 411, but we also print voter guides, especially the local ones. That's so important, and as you know, all of those costs have gone up. So if there's something anybody would like to recognize, there's an option to donate today. I don't want to make this about that, but it is important. And for our speakers, we have a little memento from this, and want to thank you all for recognizing different women. And one of the things I think that's carried through this is about how independent they were, how they persevered, and the history that came with it. It's very special. Our next event, our next meeting will be the first, I think it's October 7th, in Johnson City Library. And Heather Farmer will be speaking to tell us about Voting 101, which she teaches at the Dyer Center in Kerr. And and that one will be a hybrid meeting, so people will be able to join in by Wi-Fi. We didn't think we had Wi-Fi here, so today we're just videotaping and it'll be posted on the website. And I encourage you to take the time to visit with the presenters this morning and ask them more questions too. Yes, Maggie?
Can I say just a word about Lois Shaw?
Of course.
Okay, I'm not gonna roll up here, it's too big a pain, but, I can't tell you enough about Lois. I think she's been a volunteer and board member of the Doyle Center since the day she was born. She was one of the first people I met when I got really involved in, city boards. And I was on the board that was delighted to give funding for their renovation. And to see what that place is, has been, and will become is just amazing what they do. And not just for their own neighborhood, their own community, but for the entire area. The events they have, my goodness, their Blues Fest, if you haven't been to hear that, you are missing it. But that's just one of probably 50 things they do for the larger community during the year. And as I said, they have been our full partners and hosted us for our first successful year of citizenship. They are gonna host us for next year. And as far as BK and Delaney Sigerman, who's chairman of their board, feel now they'll host us forever for free. And so we're very grateful to Lois and all of her people. And by the way, their staff members teaches English as a second language for those people that want to come to our class but don't yet have sufficient English skills. So it is a true partnership, and I just wanted to thank the Doyle Center publicly.
We do appreciate, I even knew Lois before I came to Kerrville. I worked in San Antonio for many years in adult protective services, and we used services at Leslie Police. So it was a pleasure to be able to meet her in person. So I think this concludes. I want to thank the members of the leadership team that helped bring this together today, and for all of you for taking the time to celebrate Women's Equality Day. Thank you.